An Earthroots Insight. 23 years ago, I bought a small cottage on a lot that had been carved out as patented land from the Crown Forest the century before. Decades later, the surrounding land had been designated the White Bear Conservation Reserve because it was one of the best stands of old growth white and red pine forest in the area. Somehow it had remained intact and uncut, despite being located on Castles Lake directly opposite, which had once been the largest pine lumber mill in the region. The provenance of this miracle fades into the mists of lore, but there is an interesting theory, which I'll get to at the end. So this forest ecologist, me, with a long time pursuit of old growth pine forest, found himself nestled amongst pine that technicians had estimated to be 380 years old 20 years ago. Pure paradise. Most of the white pines around the cottage were 60 to 85 centimeters in diameter. That's DBH, diameter breast height, a forester's term that relates to tree size and thus the dimensions lumber one could cut from within the log. These were large trees by anybody's standards, but at the back of the property, there's one that was significantly bigger. This giant 400-year-old tree with its tall, straight bole had stood about 45 meters tall and had a DBH of 94 centimeters. It was the king dominating the local stand around my cottage. I used to take visitors back to this tree as an example of the majesty of the old growth pines. Through the centuries, its thick bark had allowed it to survive numerous ground fires that hadn't scorched its crown, so it was older and larger than most of the forest surrounding it. But time marches on for all life forms, and about a decade ago, I noticed that all was not well for this forest king. The foliage and some of the branches above had turned red with senescence, and there were disturbing signs that fungus or some other pathogen was at work under the bark. It took a whole decade, but now it's evident that the monarch's reign is over. It still stands and will continue to stand as branches weaken and fall during heavy snows and strong storms. The main bole will be punctured by pileated woodpeckers seeking the insect populations within, and their activity will leave cavities that will become occupied by a variety of birds and small mammals raising their families and sequentially moving in and out of their elevated apartments. In this stage of life, even though it's death, of the forest giant, it will return more in value to the local biodiversity than it ever did in its healthy form. It will become a monarch in a new sense. It will stand as an ent, as in the Tolkien novels, Lord of the Rings, an ancient relic of the genetic and biological legacy of past centuries, persisting as a standing feature in the forest, perhaps another 8 decades, and projecting its valuable wisdom into the future. Now, about that problem with the sawmill across the lake. That's what you see from where the sawmill used to stand. That's what you see today. Now, the interesting theory is how could this forest of old growth stand across from the sawmill all this time? Well, the theory is that the mill manager and his wife lived in a home, company home, right across where I'm looking from now. The wife's view from her living room was this majestic old growth on the other shore. So it's speculated that perhaps the interest in maintaining this view by the wife of the mill manager exceeded the economic interests of cutting the trees. We'll never know.